Ma'am, we're conducting an inquiry. I need documentation confirming your citizenship.
You walked up to me in a parking lot with no cause. I don't owe you anything.
You're being ordered to comply. Refusal will be treated as obstruction.
Go ahead, make this your decision. You're about to learn exactly who you're dealing with.
The parking lot of the Galleria Town Center Mall in suburban Fairfax was busy with Saturday afternoon shoppers when they cornered her. 3:47 p.m. beneath overcast skies that threatened rain. The kind of gray that makes smartphone screens hard to read outdoors. The temperature hovered at 68 degrees, comfortable enough that Alicia Monroe had left her jacket in the car. She was 29 years old, wearing a gray simple t-shirt, jean and work boots still clean from limited wear. 2 canvas shopping bags sat in her trunk. Kitchen towels, face wash, a novel she'd been meaning to read. Nothing remotely suspicious. Nothing that would justify what was about to happen. She was reaching for her car's rear door to close the trunk when she heard the footsteps. Measured, deliberate, closing in from behind. 3 federal agents in dark tactical gear, badges displayed on lanyards around their necks. DHS Enforcement Division. They'd been part of an expanded interior enforcement operation targeting immigrant communities in Northern Virginia, operating under vague directives about criminal alien apprehension that gave them wide latitude for street stops. Whether those directives legally justified stopping U.S. citizens based on appearance alone would later become the crux of a federal lawsuit. The mall's overhead parking structure camera mounted on column E7 captured the entire encounter in high definition. The timestamp read 15 hours 47 minutes and 3 seconds. The lens angle was perfect, elevated enough to show the full scene, close enough to capture body language and facial expressions. The agents were already being recorded by their own body cameras. They assumed this would be quick. Stop, question, verify, move on. Another name checked off the quota sheet. They had no idea they were approaching a former Army intelligence specialist who'd served 2 deployments in Iraq. A woman trained in operational security, constitutional law, and how to document evidence under hostile conditions. They had no idea she'd spent years navigating environments where authority was questioned, where every interaction required proof, where survival meant knowing your rights better than the people trying to strip them away. They had no idea that Alicia Monroe didn't just know her rights. She'd defended them in uniform, overseas, under fire. And she wasn't about to surrender them in a parking lot to 3 men with badges and bad training. Before we continue, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. If this story resonates with you, if you believe accountability matters, hit that subscribe button. These stories don't go viral by accident. They spread because people like you refuse to look away. Alicia Monroe wasn't thinking about constitutional law or federal overreach when she tossed the last shopping bag into her trunk. She was thinking about whether she'd remembered to buy batteries. The kind of mental checklist everyone runs through after a quick Target run. Toothpaste, check. Laundry detergent, check. That face cream her sister recommended, check. She'd parked in the outer lot near the garden section entrance where spaces were easier to find, away from the Saturday crowd fighting for spots closer to the main doors. Her silver Honda Accord sat under a stretch of open sky, no trees overhead, just asphalt and painted lines and the low hum of traffic from the highway half a mile east. The air smelled faintly of rain that hadn't fallen yet, that particular dampness that comes before a storm. Alicia inhaled deeply, enjoying the coolness against her skin after 20 minutes under fluorescent store lighting. She'd been up since 6 that morning, knocked out a 5-mile run, cleaned her apartment, and decided to tackle errands before the afternoon slipped away. This was her Saturday rhythm. Productive. Structured. Nothing complicated. She reached up to close the trunk, her fingers just touching the edge of the lid, when she heard them. Footsteps. Not the casual shuffle of someone wandering to their car or the quick clip of a parent chasing a toddler. These were different. Purposeful. Boots on pavement, moving in sync, closing distance with the kind of deliberate pace that makes the back of your neck tingle. Alicia's hand paused mid-motion. She didn't turn around immediately. Years of training had taught her not to react before assessing. Instead, she listened. 3 sets of footsteps. Maybe 4. Heavy. coming from behind and slightly to her left. She lowered the trunk lid slowly, her movements calm and controlled, then turned to face whatever was coming. That's when she saw them. 3 men in dark tactical vests, badges hanging from lanyards, hands resting near their belts in that casual but ready posture law enforcement wears like a second skin. They weren't walking past her. They were walking toward her. The lead agent, broad-shouldered with a jaw set like concrete, locked eyes with her from 15 feet away. His expression was blank. Professional. The kind of face that had delivered bad news before and expected compliance without question. Alicia straightened her posture, shoulders back, feet planted. She didn't smile. Didn't look away. Just waited. They fanned out as they approached, a practiced formation that left her boxed in against her own vehicle. The lead agent stopped 3 feet away, close enough that she could read the name on his badge. Rourke. His partners took positions on either side, cutting off angles like they'd done this 1,000 times before. One was younger, maybe late 20s, with nervous energy radiating off him in waves. The third was older, gray at the temples, watching her with the kind of cold assessment that made her skin prickle. Rourke didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Ma'am, we're conducting an inquiry. I need documentation confirming your citizenship." The words hung in the air like an accusation. Alicia felt her jaw tighten but kept her expression neutral. "Excuse me. Your citizenship status," Rourke repeated, slower this time, like she hadn't understood. "We need to verify it. Do you have identification on you?" Around them, the parking lot continued its normal Saturday rhythm. A woman loaded groceries into an SUV 2 rows over. A teenager pushed a cart full of plants toward the garden center. Nobody was paying attention yet. Nobody saw 3 federal agents surrounding a black woman demanding papers in broad daylight. Alicia felt the weight of it settling over her, that familiar pressure she'd hoped she'd left behind when she'd traded her uniform for civilian life. "You walked up to me in a parking lot with no cause," she said, her voice measured but firm. "I don't owe you anything." The younger agent shifted his weight, hand moving slightly closer to his belt. Rourke's expression didn't change, but something hardened in his eyes. "Ma'am, this is a lawful inquiry. We have authority to conduct citizenship verification as part of an ongoing operation in this area." "An operation," Alicia repeated, letting the words sit between them. "What operation? What reasonable suspicion do you have to stop me specifically?" Rourke stepped closer, invading the space between them with the casual confidence of someone who'd never been told no. "You're being ordered to comply. Refusal will be treated as obstruction." Alicia didn't step back, didn't break eye contact. She could feel her heart rate elevating, that old combat instinct kicking in, the one that calculated exits and threats and consequences in milliseconds. She let the silence stretch for 3 full seconds, watching Rourke's face, reading his certainty that she'd fold. Then she spoke, her voice steady as steel. "Go ahead. Make this your decision. You're about to learn exactly who you're dealing with." Rourke's eyes narrowed slightly, the first crack in his procedural mask. "Ma'am, I'm going to ask you one more time. I'm a United States Army veteran," Alicia cut him off, her voice carrying enough authority that the younger agent actually flinched. "I served 2 tours in Iraq. I know my constitutional rights better than you know your enforcement protocols, and what you're doing right now is a legal detention without reasonable suspicion." For a moment, something flickered across Rourke's face. Surprise, maybe. Or calculation. He glanced at the army-strong hoodie she was wearing, then back at her face, as if trying to decide whether she was bluffing. The older agent to her right let out a short breath that might have been a laugh or a scoff. It was impossible to tell which, and that ambiguity made it worse. "That's great," Rourke said, his tone flattening into dismissiveness. "Thank you for your service. Now, documentation. Unless you'd prefer we continue this conversation somewhere less convenient." The casual cruelty of it landed like a slap. "Thank you for your service," reduced to a throwaway line, a procedural checkbox before the threat. Alicia felt heat rising in her chest but kept it locked down. She'd been trained for this. Not this exact scenario, but the principle behind it. Staying calm when someone with power tried to make you panic, tried to make you make mistakes. "You don't believe me," she said quietly. Not a question, but an observation. "It's not about belief," the younger agent chimed in, trying to sound reasonable. "It's about procedure. We verify you're free to go." Simple. "Procedure," Alicia repeated, letting the word hang there. "Is it procedure to racially profile citizens in parking lots? To demand papers without articulable suspicion? Because I don't see you stopping anyone else here." She gestured toward the lot around them, where a white couple was loading a kayak onto their roof rack, where an elderly man pushed a cart full of gardening supplies, where life continued unbothered and unquestioned. Rourke's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, your military service doesn't exempt you from compliance with federal immigration enforcement." "I'm not an immigrant," Alicia said, each word deliberate. "I'm a combat veteran. And you just made the worst mistake of your career." She reached slowly into her pocket. All three agents tensed immediately, hands moving toward their weapons. Alicia pulled out her phone, held it up so they could all see the screen, and pressed record. The red recording indicator pulsed in the center of her screen. Alicia held the phone at chest height, camera lens pointed directly at Rourke's face, and her voice shifted from defensive to declarative. "State your name and badge number. All three of you. Right now." Rourke's hand shot up instinctively, palm out toward the camera. "Ma'am, you need to put that phone away." "No," Alicia said simply. The word carried the weight of 2 deployments, of firefights survived, of orders given under pressure. "You approached me without cause. You demanded documentation without legal justification. You threatened me with arrest. This is my right to document a potential civil rights violation. And if you interfere with this recording, that's another charge." The younger agent looked at Rourke, uncertainty bleeding through his tactical posture. The older one stayed still, but his eyes tracked the phone like it was a weapon. Because it was. They all knew it. A woman pushing a shopping cart slowed as she passed, her attention caught by the tension radiating from the scene. She stopped 10 feet away, pretending to check her receipt but obviously watching. Another shopper, a man in his 50s wearing a Nationals cap, paused near a parked minivan, phone already coming out of his pocket. Then another. The crowd was small but growing, a slow magnetism pulling people toward conflict the way humans always gravitate toward trouble. Alicia kept the camera steady on Rourke. "Badge number. You threatened federal obstruction charges. That makes this an official detention, which means you're required to identify yourself." "This is an active federal operation," Rourke said, but his voice had lost some of its edge. His eyes flicked toward the gathering bystanders, calculating. "You're interfering with." "I'm standing in a public parking lot," Alicia interrupted, her tone sharp now, cutting. "I haven't moved. I haven't fled. I asked you for legal justification and you gave me threats. So either arrest me right now and explain to your supervisor why you violated the Fourth Amendment, or walk away." The silence that followed was electric. The younger agent shifted his weight again, visibly uncomfortable. Somewhere behind them, a car door slammed. A child's voice carried across the lot, oblivious to the standoff unfolding 30 yards away. Rourke's hand was still raised toward the camera, frozen in a gesture that looked increasingly desperate. "Your call, agent," Alicia said quietly, the camera never wavering. "But everyone's watching now." Rourke's hand dropped from its futile gesture toward the camera and moved to his radio. That's when the younger agent made his mistake. He stepped forward, reaching for Alicia's wrist, his fingers closing around her forearm with enough pressure to make his intention clear. "Ma'am, you need to stop resisting and don't touch me." Alicia's voice cut through the parking lot like a blade. Loud enough that heads turned 3 rows over. Loud enough that the woman with the shopping cart took an instinctive step back. "Get your hands off me right now." The agent tightened his grip instead, his other hand moving toward the cuffs on his belt. "You're being detained for obstruction of—" "I'm being assaulted," Alicia shouted, her voice rising not in panic but in deliberate projection, making sure every witness heard every word. "Federal agents are physically restraining a U.S. citizen without probable cause. I am not resisting. I am recording a civil rights violation." The man in the Nationals cap had his phone up now, recording from 15 feet away. The woman with the cart fumbled for her own phone. A teenage girl near the store entrance stopped mid-stride, her thumb already moving across her screen, probably going live on Instagram or TikTok. The audience was multiplying, drawn by raised voices and the unmistakable energy of confrontation. "Let her go," someone called from the growing crowd. A male voice, steady and angry. "Back up," the older agent barked at the bystanders, his hand hovering near his weapon in a gesture meant to intimidate. "This is federal business. Clear the area." But nobody moved. If anything, more people drifted closer, phones raised like shields, like witnesses, like weapons of accountability. Alicia kept her own phone trained on the agent gripping her arm, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "You're assaulting me on camera. Multiple cameras. Everyone here sees this." Rourke's radio crackled to life, a burst of static followed by a voice Alicia couldn't make out. His face went rigid. The younger agent was still holding her arm, looking between Rourke and the crowd like a man realizing he'd walked into a trap. "Release her," Rourke said quietly. The younger agent hesitated. "But she—" "I said release her. Now." The hand around Alicia's wrist loosened, then dropped away. But the damage was done. Every phone in that parking lot had captured it. The moment of contact. The escalation. The proof. Rourke's radio crackled again, louder this time, the voice on the other end sharp enough to cut through the murmur of the crowd. "Rourke, what's your 20? We're seeing social media reports of an incident at your location. Confirm status immediately." Rourke pressed the transmit button, his jaw working like he was chewing gravel. "We're conducting a routine inquiry at Galleria Town Center. Situation is under control." "Negative," the voice snapped back. "End contact and clear the scene." "That's a direct order. Do you copy?" The silence that followed was devastating. Rourke stood there, radio in hand, while the weight of his supervisor's command settled over him like a spotlight. The younger agent who'd grabbed Alicia had gone pale, his eyes darting between Rourke and the phone still recording from every angle. The older agent took a step back, physically distancing himself from the situation as if he could retroactively claim he'd never been part of it. Alicia lowered her phone slightly but kept recording. Her voice was calm now, measured, the tone of someone who knew they'd already won. "Names and badge numbers. All three of you. For the record." Rourke's face flushed red, a visible wave of humiliation creeping up from his collar. He opened his mouth, closed it, then seemed to realize he had no good options left. "Agent Rourke. Badge 7429. "Louder," Alicia said. "So everyone can hear." "Agent Michael Rourke," he repeated, his voice carrying across the lot now, each word costing him something. "Badge number 7429. The younger agent looked like he might be sick. "Agent Collins. Badge 8153. The older agent hesitated longest, his pride warring with self-preservation. Finally, he muttered, "Agent DeMarco. 6671. Alicia nodded slowly, making a show of checking that the recording was still active. Around them, the crowd had swelled to maybe 20 people, a semicircle of witnesses documenting everything. Someone near the back said, "Got all their faces," and someone else replied, "Already posted it." Rourke's radio crackled one more time. "Rourke," I said, "clear the scene. Now." He gestured sharply to his partners, a tight, angry motion that spoke volumes. The three of them turned and walked away, their backs rigid with wounded authority, moving through the crowd that parted for them with visible disdain. Nobody said anything as they left. Nobody needed to. The phones tracked them all the way to their unmarked vehicle, capturing every step of their retreat. Alicia stood there, phone still raised, until their car disappeared from the lot. Marcus Chen received the video file on a Tuesday morning, forwarded by a paralegal who'd flagged it as urgent. He was 3 sips into his coffee when he clicked play, expecting another questionable traffic stop or maybe excessive force during a protest. What he got instead was a masterclass in constitutional violation captured in high definition. By the time the footage ended, Chen had already opened a new case file and started drafting correspondence. Chen was a partner at the ACLU's regional office, a civil rights attorney who'd built his reputation on cases that made agencies squirm. He watched Alicia's video 4 times, then the bystander footage that had surfaced online, then the security camera angle the mall had released after a public records request. Every angle told the same story. No probable cause. No reasonable suspicion. Just 3 federal agents demanding papers from a black woman in a parking lot because she existed in their field of view. Within 48 hours, Chen had contacted Alicia. Within a week, they'd filed a federal lawsuit alleging Fourth Amendment violations, unlawful detention, assault, and racial profiling. The complaint named Agent Rourke, the younger agent who'd grabbed her arm, and the agency itself. 18 pages of legal argument backed by video evidence that made the defendants look exactly as bad as they were. The agency's first move was predictable. A letter from their general counsel arrived 3 weeks later, carefully worded, offering a settlement. Low 6 figures. A non-disclosure agreement. No admission of wrongdoing. The standard playbook for making problems disappear quietly. Chen forwarded the offer to Alicia over secure email. They spoke that evening on a call that lasted 6 minutes. "What do you want to do?" he asked, already knowing her answer from the steel in her voice during their first meeting. "I want a jury," Alicia said. "I want those agents to sit in a courtroom and watch themselves on that screen. I want the policy that sent them into that parking lot exposed in public record. I don't want money to make this go away. I want accountability." Chen smiled despite himself. "Then we go to trial." The rejection letter went out the next morning. Within days, the case made national news. Civil rights organizations filed amicus briefs. Legal analysts debated the implications on cable news. Social media exploded with hashtags and think pieces. The video had gone viral, but now it had teeth. Now it had a courtroom waiting. The courtroom in the federal building downtown was smaller than most people expected from television, with wood paneling that absorbed sound and fluorescent lights that made everyone look slightly tired. The jury box held 12 citizens who'd been selected for their supposed impartiality, though by day 3 of testimony, several were visibly struggling to maintain neutral expressions. Chen stood at the plaintiff's table, remote control in hand, and pressed play for the 4th time that week. The overhead screen flickered to life with the parking lot footage. The jury had seen it before during opening arguments, but context changes everything. Now they'd heard from Alicia herself, from the bystanders, from the mall security director who'd testified about camera placement and retention policies. Now they watched it with informed eyes. The moment when the younger agent grabbed Alicia's arm played in slow motion. A juror in the back row, a middle-aged black woman who'd identified herself during selection as a retired teacher, closed her eyes briefly. The man beside her, white, early 60s, former insurance adjuster, shook his head almost imperceptibly. Chen let the video play through to the moment of release, then paused it on Rourke's face, frozen in an expression somewhere between anger and panic. "That's the moment," Chen said quietly, when Agent Rourke realized this wasn't going to disappear. The defense had tried to paint it as reasonable enforcement, routine questioning, unfortunate escalation but within policy guidelines. Their argument fell apart when Chen called Deputy Director Catherine Walsh to the stand. She'd been subpoenaed by the plaintiff, not the defense, which told you everything about how the agency viewed her testimony. Walsh was career federal service, 26 years, currently overseeing operational protocols for the Mid-Atlantic region. She sat in the witness box wearing a navy suit and an expression of someone who'd lost sleep over this case. Chen approached with a document in hand. Deputy Director Walsh, you reviewed the operational brief that authorized the enforcement action in question, correct? I did. And in your professional opinion, did that brief provide legal justification for stopping Ms. Monroe? Walsh hesitated. The courtroom went silent. Even the court reporter seemed to stop breathing. No, Walsh said finally. There was no articulable suspicion. The stop violated agency policy and constitutional standards. Two jurors leaned forward simultaneously. The retired teacher looked at Alicia with something that transcended sympathy. It was recognition. Validation. The system, for once, was saying what everyone had known from that first video frame. The truth. The jury deliberated for 3 hours and 42 minutes. Chen had tried enough cases to know that timing meant everything. Too fast suggested they hadn't taken it seriously. Too long meant division, compromise, watered-down awards. Just under 4 hours meant they'd discussed it thoroughly, reviewed the evidence, and reached consensus without drama. When the foreman stood to read the verdict, Alicia sat perfectly still at the plaintiff's table. Hands folded, breathing steady. The same composure she'd shown in that parking lot. The same discipline that had carried her through firefights and federal courtrooms alike. We the jury find in favor of the plaintiff, Alicia Monroe, on all counts. The retired teacher in the jury box smiled. Small but unmistakable. The courtroom stirred with controlled energy, reporters already typing on phones they'd snuck past bailiffs. Spectators exhaling tension they'd held for days. The damages came next. $2.7 million. Compensatory and punitive combined. A number large enough to make headlines. Large enough to make agencies reconsider their training protocols and enforcement priorities. Agent Rourke sat stone-faced at the defense table. The younger agent who'd grabbed her arm stared at his hands. Within a week, the agency issued a public statement. Disciplinary action had been taken against the agents involved. Retraining programs were being implemented. Operational protocols were under comprehensive review. The language was careful, sanitized, but it was there in official record. Admission through bureaucratic euphemism. Accountability laundered through policy reform. But the real shift happened more quietly. In places the verdict couldn't directly touch. Alicia's phone began ringing with requests. Civil rights organizations wanted her to speak at conferences. Law schools invited her to discuss constitutional protections with future attorneys. Veterans groups asked her to share her story at advocacy events. She said yes selectively, strategically, choosing platforms where her voice could reach people who needed to hear it. 6 months after the verdict, she stood on a stage at a veterans' rights symposium in Baltimore, microphone in hand, facing an audience of 300 people. She told them about the parking lot, about staying calm when power tried to overwhelm her, about documentation and witnesses and refusing to be erased. They thought they could demand my proof of belonging, she said, her voice carrying to the back row. But I already belonged. I'd earned that right in uniform, in deserts overseas, defending the very Constitution they violated. What I learned is this: your rights only protect you if you know them, assert them, and refuse to let anyone take them without consequence. The standing ovation lasted 90 seconds. But the impact would echo much longer.